to Sector Gamma right now. We have multiple hostiles engaged. I need air support immediately. Confirm status on the perimeter units.
Sometimes, the people who save the most lives are the ones nobody ever notices. The rain had been falling for hours, tapping against the glass of the Emergency Operations Center like an impatient clock. Inside, the lights never dimmed. Screens glowed, phones rang, voices overlapped. Evelyn Moore sat at her station, headset pressed tight against her ear, eyes steady on the map in front of her. Another call came through. Another decision that couldn't be wrong. If she doesn't answer, people die. That sentence followed Evelyn everywhere, even when no one said it out loud. She coordinated routes, rerouted units, calmed panicked voices on the other end of the line. When the crisis finally passed, there was no applause, just silence and the quiet hum of machines doing what they were built to do. Evelyn took off her headset and exhaled, the kind of breath you only release when you're sure it's over. Only then did she look at her phone. There was an email waiting. She almost ignored it. Evelyn had learned not to expect much from messages that arrived after midnight. But something made her pause. She opened it, read the first line, then read it again, slower this time, as if the words might disappear. Congratulations. You have been selected. Her name followed. Then the title. The National Emergency Innovation Medal. Live broadcast. For a moment, the noise of the room faded. Evelyn felt something unfamiliar tighten in her chest. Not excitement, not joy. Something quieter, something fragile. At home, the Moore family kitchen looked exactly the same as it always had. Clean counters, framed photos, smiles frozen in time. Evelyn had grown up in that house, learning one simple rule: don't make things complicated. Her parents valued stability, appearances, and stories that sounded good when repeated to others. Her older sister Lauren had mastered that skill early. Cameras loved her. People listened when she spoke. Evelyn learned a different lesson. She learned how to stay calm when things went wrong, how to be reliable, how to be the one everyone leaned on without ever asking how she was holding up. She was the daughter no one worried about. Growing up, that sounded like a compliment. As an adult, it felt more like a sentence. Evelyn read the email again. At the bottom, a line stood out, simple and polite. You may invite your family. She stared at it longer than she should have. In her mind, she pictured her parents sitting in the audience, proud smiles on their faces. She imagined Lauren filming the moment, finally telling people about her sister who worked behind the scenes. The image felt distant, like a scene from someone else's life. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. Evelyn locked her screen and stood up, slipping her phone into her pocket. Around her, the night shift moved on, already preparing for the next emergency. That was the world she knew. Show up, do the work. Don't expect praise. She didn't know it yet, but that email was the first crack in a story that had been building her entire life. A story about family, silence, and what happens when the person who always stays finally realizes no one was ever watching. And sometimes, the most painful revenge stories don't begin with anger at all. They begin with being overlooked one too many times. Evelyn waited 3 days before telling them. Not because she was busy, not because she forgot, but because part of her wanted to see if the feeling would pass. If the email would start to feel smaller, safer, like all the other things she had learned to keep to herself. It didn't. So on Sunday evening, she sat alone at her kitchen table, the city quiet outside her window, and opened the family group chat. The same one that had existed for years. Birthdays, holiday photos, quick updates about who was visiting whom. It was loud when it needed to be loud, silent when it mattered. She typed slowly. I've been invited to receive a national award for my work. The ceremony is next month. It'll be broadcast live. It would mean a lot to me if you came or watched. She read it twice before hitting send. Then she set the phone down face up, like a small test of courage. The typing bubble appeared almost immediately. Lauren answered first. "An award," she wrote. "For what? Routing software?" A pause. Then, "I don't think we can make that. We already have tickets for a weekend in Nashville. You know how rare it is for all of us to be free." Evelyn felt the familiar tightening in her chest. Not surprise. Recognition. Her mother followed. "I'm sure it's very nice, honey," she wrote. "But those things are usually pretty long and formal. Your father's been exhausted lately." Then her dad. "Don't take it personally if we don't go," he said. "We're proud of you, you know that. We just don't have time for every little event." Every little event. Evelyn stared at the words until the screen dimmed. She imagined herself standing in that ballroom alone, her name read out to a room full of strangers, while the people who had raised her chose something louder, brighter, easier. She could explain. She could tell them the award came from a federal agency, that it recognized work that saved lives, that it wasn't just a plaque and a handshake. She didn't. Instead, she typed one word. "Okay." And that was it. The night of the ceremony crept closer, measured in rehearsals, security emails, and quiet congratulations from co-workers. At work, people treated it like a big deal. They practiced introductions. They joked about camera angles. Someone even asked if her family was excited. Evelyn smiled and said yes. It was easier. At home, the family chat filled with other plans. Photos of Lauren's outfits. Messages about hotel check-ins and concert schedules. No one mentioned the ceremony again. On the evening itself, Evelyn stood in a downtown hotel room while a stylist pinned the back of her dress. She barely recognized her reflection. Calm. Polished. Someone important enough to be named on a program. Down the street, her family was lining up for a show, laughing, unaware, or unwilling to be aware, that somewhere else in the city, her name was about to be spoken out loud for the first time in a way that couldn't be ignored. As the ballroom lights dimmed and the cameras powered on, Evelyn took her seat, hands folded, spine straight. She told herself she didn't need them there, that she had done fine on her own before. Still, when she glanced at the empty chairs beside her, something inside her shifted. Not breaking, waking up. The moment Evelyn's name was read, the room changed. Applause rose in a clean, practiced wave, the kind that came from people who understood exactly what the award meant. The screen above the stage filled with her face, calm but slightly stunned, the way it always looked when something important finally surfaced after years of quiet work. She stood, walked, accepted the plaque, smiled when the cameras found her. From the stage, she couldn't see the empty seats. From the stage, it almost felt like she belonged everywhere at once. Across the city, during a lull between songs, a massive screen above a crowded arena flickered. The concert feed cut briefly to a live broadcast highlight. A woman's face appeared. Her name, her title. A caption explaining in plain words how her work had helped emergency crews reach people faster. People nearby turned. Someone nudged someone else. A stranger asked a casual question that landed like a slap. "Hey, are you related to her?" That was when the phones started vibrating. Back in the ballroom, Evelyn had just returned to her seat when her bag began to buzz. Once, then again, then non-stop. She didn't look. She already knew who it was. After the ceremony ended and the crowd dissolved into soft conversations and clinking glasses, Evelyn finally stepped into the quiet of the lobby and took her phone out. Dozens of missed calls. Messages stacked on top of each other in the family chat, the tone completely different now. Her mother wrote first, long paragraphs, breathless, talking about how surreal it had been to see Evelyn's face towering over the crowd, how people had stared, how proud she felt. Her father followed, more restrained, but no less intense. He mentioned strangers congratulating them. Asked why Evelyn hadn't said it would be on screens that big. Said he wished he'd understood. Lauren's messages came last. Short, performative, full of exclamation points and screenshots taken from someone else's video. I had no idea it was this major. Everyone was asking about you. We're so proud. Evelyn leaned against the marble wall and read every word slowly. No one apologized. No one mentioned the invitation they'd dismissed. No one acknowledged the choice they'd made. Instead, the story was already being rewritten, shaped into something that made them look surprised but supportive, absent but important. The manipulation was subtle, familiar. It always had been. By the time Evelyn got home, the messages had shifted again. Now they were planning. Her mother suggested talking to local reporters as a family. Her father wondered if the neighborhood might be interested in a feature. Lauren floated the idea of posting childhood photos, framing herself as the sister who had always believed. They were moving fast, filling the space before Evelyn could define it herself. She scrolled back up, past the praise, past the pride, until she reached the quiet part of the thread. Her original message. Lauren's dismissal. Her father's line about not having time. Evelyn took screenshots, not out of spite, out of clarity. For the first time, she saw the pattern clearly. The way her achievements only mattered once they could be displayed. The way love was offered loudly, but only after the world had confirmed she was worth loving. She set the phone down on the counter and looked at the plaque resting under the kitchen light. It reflected her face back at her, steady and unsmiling. This was the moment they thought they had regained control of the narrative. They were wrong, because standing there, alone in her apartment, Evelyn realized something had shifted for good. The power they'd always held over her wasn't gone yet, but it was cracking. And this time, she wasn't going to rush in to fix it for them. The pressure didn't come all at once. It crept in, polite at first, dressed up as pride. The morning after the ceremony, Evelyn woke to a full inbox. Interview requests, messages from city officials, notes from co-workers who had watched the broadcast and replayed the clip. It was overwhelming, but clean, professional. Everything focused on the work. Then she opened the family chat. Her mother had already been busy. She wrote about a local morning show that had mentioned Evelyn's name, about how the host asked what kind of home raised someone like her, about how it felt wrong not to answer. People are curious, she said. It's natural. Her father followed with a longer message, carefully worded. He reminded Evelyn of sacrifices, long hours, missed vacations. Framed it as context, not guilt, but it landed heavy all the same. He said it wouldn't hurt to let people see the full picture. Their picture. Lauren didn't bother with subtlety. She had already posted. Evelyn found out from a coworker who sent her a screenshot with a single line underneath. Is this your sister? It was an old photo, the two of them as teenagers. Lauren front and center, smiling at the camera. Evelyn half-turned, cropped just enough to feel accidental. The caption talked about believing in family, about knowing, my little sister was destined for something big. The comments were worse. Strangers praising Lauren for being supportive, for raising her right, for being part of the story. Evelyn's chest tightened. Her hands went cold. She messaged Lauren privately, asked her to take it down. Another replied minutes later, defensive, sharp. She said Evelyn was overreacting, that the post wasn't about stealing anything, that this was just how things worked when something good happened to the family. By noon, her parents had started calling people Evelyn worked with, framing it as excitement, asking questions that edged too close to details she hadn't shared. One of her team members mentioned it carefully, eyes apologetic, unsure if this was normal. That was the moment the humiliation set in. Not loud, not public, but invasive. Evelyn felt exposed, like a door she'd kept locked her whole life had been opened without permission. Her work, her boundaries, her story, all being handled by people who had skipped the one moment that mattered. She tried to slow it down, sent a message asking them to stop contacting anyone on her behalf, to let her manage things through her department. Her mother replied with hurt confusion. Her father bristled, accusing her of ingratitude. Lauren went quiet for an hour, then came back swinging, accusing Evelyn of trying to erase them now that she was important. The words piled up. Old patterns resurfaced. Every time Evelyn tried to explain, the conversation twisted until she was the problem. Too sensitive, too cold, too dramatic. By evening, she was exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. She sat alone in her living room, phone buzzing again and again on the coffee table, and felt herself reach the edge of something. The familiar urge rose, the one that told her to smooth things over, to apologize, to make peace so everyone else could be comfortable. For the first time, she didn't obey it. She let the phone ring. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent. Inside, Evelyn sat very still, realizing that what hurt most wasn't the attention or the pressure. It was the clarity. They weren't proud of her work. They were proud of how it made them look. And that understanding pushed her to a limit she couldn't retreat from anymore. The quiet that followed was unfamiliar. Evelyn woke the next morning to sunlight and a phone that hadn't stopped buzzing overnight. She didn't reach for it right away. For once, there was no emergency pulling her out of bed, no system failure, no voice on the line asking her to fix something before it broke. She sat there and listened to her own breathing. When she finally picked up the phone, she didn't open the family chat. She opened an email from the city's communications office instead. Clear language, calm tone, guidelines about media boundaries. A reminder that she was not required to share anything personal to justify professional recognition. Reading it felt like someone had handed her permission she'd never known she needed. At work, the response was already taking shape. Her department scheduled a meeting, not to manage her emotions, but to protect the work. They outlined who would speak to press, what would be shared, and what would stay internal. They asked her where she wanted the line drawn. No one argued when she drew it firmly. That afternoon, a reporter reached out directly, mentioning interest in her family background. Evelyn declined politely and redirected the conversation to the system itself, to response times and outcomes, and the people who depended on them. The reporter agreed without protest. It was that easy. The truth landed slowly but solidly. The pressure she'd been feeling didn't come from the world. It came from home. When she opened the family chat later that evening, she scrolled past the noise until she reached the bottom. Her thumbs hovered over the keyboard. This time, she didn't write from habit or fear. She wrote from clarity. She acknowledged the award. She said it had been a big moment. Then she set boundaries, plainly. No interviews about her childhood, no contacting her co-workers, no public posts using her name or image without permission. She named the hurt without decorating it. "I asked you to be there," she wrote. "You chose not to come. Watching you try to step into the spotlight now is painful. She didn't accuse. She didn't list receipts. She didn't soften the message to make it easier to swallow. She hit send and set the phone down. The replies came fast. Her mother tried to explain, then minimize. Her father pushed back, calling her unfair. Lauren's messages were sharp, defensive, accusing Evelyn of rewriting history. For the first time, the words didn't pull her in. She read them the way you read something that no longer belongs to you. Familiar language, old tactics, nothing new. Instead of responding, she opened her settings and muted the thread. Then, one by one, she silenced individual alerts. The messages could keep coming. They just wouldn't reach her unless she invited them to. The system, she realized, wasn't just the software she'd built. It was her life. That night, Evelyn stood by her window, city lights blinking below, and felt something settle into place. Not triumph, not revenge. Alignment. The truth was out, at least to herself. She didn't need them to understand it yet. Or ever. For the first time, she wasn't waiting for permission to be seen. She had already stepped out of the noise, and whatever came next, she would meet it on her own terms. The world didn't slow down after that. It simply rearranged itself. In the weeks that followed, the attention settled into something manageable. Interviews focused on the system, not the story. Funding discussions moved forward. New engineers joined the team, drawn by the work rather than the noise around it. Evelyn returned to the rhythm she knew best, refining models, reviewing edge cases, sitting in rooms where people listened because what she said mattered. No one asked about her family anymore. At home, the silence held. Messages still arrived in the muted thread, sometimes long, sometimes brief. Updates that assumed closeness without earning it. Evelyn read them when she chose to, not out of obligation. She didn't respond, not as punishment, as preservation. Her parents adapted in their own way. They continued telling stories to neighbors and distant relatives, versions where they were proud from the beginning, where timing had simply been unlucky. Those stories traveled without her, and for once, she let them. Lauren tried one last approach, a carefully worded email. No accusations this time, just nostalgia. A suggestion to move forward. Evelyn read it once, then archived it. She didn't need to argue with a version of the past that refused to tell the whole truth. What changed instead were the smaller things. Evelyn started having dinner with people who knew her as she was now, not as a role she'd played for years. She mentored interns who reminded her of herself. Quiet, capable, unsure if anyone would notice. She told them the truth she'd learned too late. That being reliable didn't mean being invisible. And that boundaries weren't walls, they were doors you controlled. One evening, as she walked home from work, her phone buzzed. A message from a dispatcher she'd never met in person. He thanked her for the system update that had rerouted a unit faster during a late-night call. He said it made a difference. Evelyn smiled, just a little. That was the recognition that mattered. Months later, she passed the hotel where the ceremony had been held. The lights were different. Another event, another crowd. No one inside knew who she was, and that felt right. She had learned something essential through all of it. Justice didn't always arrive as confrontation. Sometimes it showed up as distance, as the quiet refusal to keep explaining your worth to people committed to misunderstanding it. Her family never apologized in the way she'd once hoped they might, but they also never crossed her boundaries again. Not because they finally understood, but because they no longer had access.
If you look right here,
And in that
these
space,
Q3
something
projections are
healed.
significantly
Evelyn
exceeding
didn't
our
win by
targets.
being louder.
That makes sense.
She didn't win by exposing anyone or demanding acknowledgement. She won by choosing herself, calmly, consistently, and without spectacle. If there was any lesson in her story, it wasn't about success, or awards, or even family. It was about recognizing the moment when staying silent stops being survival and starts being self-erasure. She didn't erase herself anymore. She kept her space. And in that space, she finally felt whole.